Have you ever wondered why you make the decisions you do? Each day we're faced with countless decisions, from the seemingly insignificant, like what to have for breakfast, to the life-altering, such as choosing a career path. But have you ever stopped to think about the process that goes on in your mind when you're making these decisions? This is the realm of decision-making psychology, a fascinating field that delves into the cognitive processes behind our choices. It's the intricate dance of thought patterns, emotions, and biases that steer us towards a particular decision. You might think that you're a rational being, making logical decisions based on facts and evidence, but the truth is, our decision-making process is far from being purely rational. It's often influenced by a complex web of cognitive biases. Cognitive biases, in essence, are systematic errors in thinking that affect the decisions and judgments that people make. They're mental shortcuts or heuristics that our brains use to simplify decision-making. They're not inherently bad or good, they simply are, and they play a significant role in shaping our decisions and our lives. Imagine you're at a restaurant deciding between two dishes. You might think you're making a rational decision based on factors like taste, health, and cost. But unbeknownst to you, your decision could be swayed by a host of cognitive biases. Perhaps you're leaning towards one dish because it's what you always order, a bias towards the familiar, known as the status quo bias. Or maybe you're influenced by what others at your table are ordering, a case of social proof. Yes, the world of decision-making is a fascinating one, full of twists and turns, unseen influences, and intriguing psychology. It's a journey into the labyrinth of the human mind, a journey that we're about to embark on together. Now let's dive into the fascinating world of cognitive biases and how they shape our decisions. Prepare to be surprised, to question, to learn, and most importantly, to understand yourself and others a little better. Our journey into the psychology of decision-making starts now. In the labyrinth of our minds, cognitive biases are the invisible puppeteers pulling the strings. Let's dive in. Cognitive biases, in essence, are systematic errors in thinking that can affect the decisions and judgments that people make. Think of them as the brain's way of taking a shortcut. They are mental strategies the brain uses to save energy when we're processing loads of information. But here's the catch. These shortcuts are not always the best route. They can lead us astray, distorting our perception of reality and influencing our decision-making process. They can make us overvalue our own opinions, perceive a situation based on our current emotional state, or even make decisions based on the first information we receive. Consider this. You're deciding on what to have for dinner. You might think you're making a rational choice based on your dietary needs and taste preferences, but in reality, your brain might be influenced by other factors. Maybe you're biased towards a particular cuisine because it's what you grew up eating, or perhaps you're more inclined to choose a dish because it was the first one you saw on the menu. These are subtle instances of cognitive biases at play. Or let's say you're making a crucial decision at work. You might believe you're weighing all the pros and cons objectively, but in fact, your judgment could be clouded by cognitive biases. You might be overconfident about a project's success because you're personally invested in it, or you could be ignoring valuable feedback because it doesn't align with your preconceived notions. Again, these are cognitive biases, subtly influencing your decisions. It's important to remember that cognitive biases are not inherently bad. They've evolved for a reason. They help us make quick decisions when there's too much information to process or when the stakes aren't too high. But when it comes to significant decisions, recognizing and overcoming these biases can lead to more rational and effective choices. Cognitive biases, they're like mental shortcuts with a twist, don't you think? Imagine this, you firmly believe in a theory and you only see evidence that supports it. Sound familiar? This is a classic example of confirmation bias, a psychological phenomenon that has a profound influence on our decision-making process. Let's delve into a real-life case study to illustrate this bias. Consider the case of a detective. Let's call him Arjun. Arjun is convinced that a certain individual is guilty of a crime. Now, because of his preconceived notion, Arjun only pays attention to the evidence that incriminates this person, conveniently ignoring or downplaying any evidence suggesting otherwise. This leads him to make a judgment based on his bias, rather than the entirety of the evidence available to him. This is confirmation bias in action. It's like wearing a pair of tinted glasses that only allow us to see what we want to see. We cherry-pick information that reinforces our existing beliefs, while disregarding or minimizing information that contradicts them. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's just human nature. And to a certain extent, you're right. Our brains are wired to seek consistency and avoid cognitive dissonance, which is the mental discomfort we feel when we hold two or more contradictory beliefs or values. But here's the catch. When unchecked, confirmation bias can lead to flawed decision-making. Think about it. If we're only looking for information that supports our beliefs, we're not getting the full picture. We're not considering all the possible outcomes or alternatives. We're making decisions based on a skewed perception of reality, which is not only misleading but can also be downright dangerous. For instance, in Arjun's case, his confirmation bias could lead to a wrongful conviction, ruining an innocent person's life. On a broader scale, confirmation bias can fuel societal divisions as people only consume information that aligns with their viewpoints, further entrenching their beliefs and creating echo chambers. So, confirmation bias can lead us to make decisions based on what we want to believe, rather than what is true. It's a subtle yet powerful force that shapes our perceptions, judgments, and decisions. Becoming aware of it is the first step towards making more objective and informed decisions. Have you ever been swayed by the first piece of information you hear? Consider this. You're buying a car, and the salesperson tells you the starting price. Suddenly, that first price seems to stick in your mind, influencing every subsequent negotiation. You're experiencing what psychologists call the anchoring bias. Anchoring bias is a cognitive shortcut characterized by the tendency to rely heavily on the first piece of information encountered when making decisions. It's like throwing an anchor into a sea of information. Wherever it lands, that's where your mind tends to stay. Let's dive into a real-life case study. Picture a group of real estate agents given a tour of a house and told the listing price. Later, they estimated the house's value around that initial price. But here's the twist. Each agent received a different listing price. Those given a higher initial price estimated the house's worth as higher, and vice versa. The agents, despite their expertise, were anchored by the first piece of information they received. This bias doesn't just affect house prices. It influences everything from our perceptions of people to our negotiation tactics. For instance, in a courtroom, the first lawyer to speak often sets the anchor, influencing how the jury perceives the case. In a job interview, the first salary number thrown out often becomes the anchor for all future negotiations. Anchoring bias can lead to inaccurate judgments because it causes us to give too much weight to initial information and ignore subsequent data. We can become trapped in our first impressions, our initial perceptions, or the first number we hear, often leading us astray. So, how can we avoid the anchoring bias trap? Awareness is the first step. Recognize when you might be anchoring and make a conscious effort to consider other information. Beware of the anchoring bias. It might just anchor your decisions to the wrong shore. Can we ever escape the grasp of these cognitive biases? A question that stirs the minds of many. The answer is yes, we can, but it requires effort, practice, and most importantly, self-awareness. Firstly, we need to understand that our brains are wired to take shortcuts. These cognitive biases are the brain's way of dealing with information overload. So, to overcome them, we need to slow down, take a step back, and analyze our thoughts and decisions. Secondly, we must foster an environment of open-mindedness. This means being open to new information, even if it contradicts our existing beliefs. It's about challenging our own views and not falling prey to confirmation bias, where we only accept information that aligns with our existing beliefs. Thirdly, we need to be aware of our own biases. Self-awareness is key. We need to recognize when we're falling into the trap of cognitive biases and take steps to correct them. This could be as simple as asking ourselves, am I giving too much weight to the first piece of information I received? Or am I only considering evidence that supports my preconceived notions? Furthermore, adopting a mindset of continuous learning can help us overcome these biases. We must remember that our knowledge and understanding are always evolving, and we must be open to changing our minds when presented with new evidence. Lastly, we can utilize tools and techniques designed to help us make more rational decisions. Techniques such as the 6 thinking hats method can help us view a problem from multiple perspectives and reduce the impact of cognitive biases. So yes, Overcoming cognitive biases is possible. It takes work, it takes practice, and it takes a willingness to question our own beliefs and assumptions. But the reward is a more rational, more objective, and ultimately a more accurate way of understanding the world around us. Remember, awareness is the first step to overcoming these invisible puppeteers. So what's the takeaway from all this? The intrigue of decision-making is deeply rooted in our cognitive biases. Confirmation bias and anchoring bias can lead us astray, but awareness is the first step towards overcoming these pitfalls. By recognizing these biases, we can make more informed, less biased decisions. Decisions shape our lives, and understanding the psychology behind them can make all the difference. Until next time, stay curious and keep exploring.